Sweet.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Adobe Live. Thank you, folks, so much for joining us this morning for a really awesome kind of photo compositing, photo editing stream. My name is Voodoo Val, and I am going to be host this morning for this segment, and I am joined by my new friend, Aaron Bernstein. Aaron, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm happy to hear it.
Middle of the week, powering through.
This is like kind of like that hump, where you're kind of just like, am I good? I think I'm good. I hope I'm good.
It's too late either way, but
Yeah.
there's an end in sight, so it's all good here.
Well, I'm super excited to kind of jump into what you have planned for, kind of to show us and everything today. Before we jump into the specifics of your project and all of that good stuff, I do want to do a couple of reminders for our community that's joining us. There are so many familiar faces in the chat this morning. I see Gabriella and Bruce, who did not know I was here and just admitted to not working on his DC, and Steve and Michelle and Frank. Welcome, everyone. If you're over on the YouTube channel, please head over to behance.net where we are reading the chat. If you're wondering who I'm greeting and why you don't see them, that would be why, because we are over on Behance. And yeah, we're gonna dive into a pretty awesome segment today. Why don't you, Aaron, for anyone who's a little unfamiliar with you, have planned to show us today?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Aaron Bernstein. I was an Adobe Creative resident 2018 to 2019. Feels like a very long time ago, but also just the other day. So if you guys aren't as familiar, the Adobe Creative Residency is a year-long program through Adobe that sort of fosters talent that's looking to transition into new focus or really like hone in on a craft that they're already doing. So I am a photographer animator living in New York City, primarily working, as you can see, a lot with sort of square format digital content for a lot of food and lifestyle brands. It's sort of starting to branch out beyond just food. I actually come from a fashion background. I thought I wanted to be a fashion photographer, shooting all the magazine covers and everything that you can find in magazines. But simultaneously, I guess I'm showing my age a little bit, but while, looking into college and starting to look at higher education in 2010, the magazine industry was changing drastically, taking much more of a digital focus. And I don't want to say that I lost interest, but I didn't know how that would sort of pivot for me. So I was working in fashion for the first part of my career, actually shooting a lot of portraiture, celebrity portraiture. I was doing some editorial work. And what always attracted me to fashion was sort of like the colors and the shapes and the textures through clothes and what those could look like on figures. And you can sort of see in this work, though, there is like a presence of food and these little food elements. Obviously, like it's a little bit more commercialized now for my book. But I started incorporating food as these props in these shoots or in portraits to sort of create more of a story or sort of to acknowledge some different cultural commentaries. And eventually, like living in New York City, it's very hard to produce these sort of shoots. Big team, big efforts. So I began to strip it down and focus solely on food. And so I knew that my interests were shifting, but I wasn't really sure how to get there. So through the residency, I started to pivot. So I had the year to, it felt like what I would think that grad school is like, just like working nonstop, throwing everything at a wall, seeing what would stick. Creatively, just was really great to have a year to start to like try to focus that in a little bit while simultaneously doing it very publicly.
Yeah.
You might have watched
Very publicly, very
failing
suddenly.
publicly, succeeding publicly. And it was a great experience. And so that ended in May 2019, and it's just sort of hasn't stopped since.
Nice.
Yeah, so this is more in line with what I do now. And I think what's interesting about today, specifically with photo compositing, is especially in food photography, you wouldn't necessarily expect things to be composites, right? So I really want to show today how maybe compositing, can help sort of take realistic imagery to the next level and sort of help you polish some, just, put that extra little something into your images. So a lot of these, even like you would never really expect that, I might have gone in with some extra garnishes here, for example, after the fact and added them in.
Oh, so you mean like, not enhancing, but like adding like the extra little items and everything into it then.
Exactly, yeah.
Nice.
I find myself a lot, especially in the last year with the pandemic, like I don't have access to full teams anymore. There's not really any food stylists on set or assistants. It's very rare. So I've sort of had to learn how to wear all hats on a set. And a lot of that I found is shooting something as sort of like a base and a template, and then shooting all the other elements one thing at a time that I know that I can sort of start to build back in.
Gotcha.
At the same time, I do try to shoot like everything in camera. But especially with food, which can be so finicky, like it is nice to sort of like craft through a bunch of different images. So I still consider them like real. But
oh yeah, I think to be perfectly honest, I think that there's like a lot of different ideas and opinions on, how people who are doing digital art are creating their end products. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that anything is like cheating or not doing it quote unquote right. I think when you're using, digital art as a medium, I think everything is technique. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
Every artist finds their groove and their way to do something, and that's that person's technique, and they can share it and other people can try it and all that good stuff. But yeah, I think it's personal finesse, maybe, if you will. And
Sure.
and I like it.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting lesson to learn that there's no right answer, especially when sort of crafting your imagery or your art, and it feels like maybe there is a right answer that you just can't always find or grasp onto because you see someone else doing it like a very different way than you would ever think. But just sort of like lean into what you know how to do best, even if it's not necessarily the most direct way or the most convenient way time-wise or how someone else might do it. That was like a very big lesson and still is for me. I often, and I'm sure I'll say it a bunch during the stream, say things like, oh, this probably isn't right, or, oh, I probably don't do this correctly, but it's right for me. And I'm trying to embrace that more. So,
I do the same thing all the time because I think that one of the things that, and you've been, like working with Adobe for a long time, and I've been, kind of streaming on Adobe Live for a while. And I think that a common thing that I'll see is I'll do something and then someone will say, that works, but why not use the pen tool, or why not use, X, Y, and Z? And I always say that there are so many ways, wonderful ways to do things within the Adobe apps. But sometimes the best way is the way that I love the most, not necessarily the fast way and the most accurate way, but the way that I truly enjoy doing it sometimes is the best course of action.
Exactly.
And that's just that. So.
Because 99% of the time, you're the only one seeing that process anyway. People are only seeing the outcome. And as long as you're not ruining your files or making, really destructive edits or decisions, I think it's totally okay.
Unless you stream on Adobe Live and people find out that sometimes you rasterize your smart objects and erase parts of them.
For
And
sure.
and
Which
I do that sometimes, and I know that people hate it.
I do it all the time, and I'm
Yes, yes.
going to do it today.
Did
That
we
was
just
like,
become best friends, Aaron?
I think we did. I was literally like thinking about that this morning, like, oh, I always rasterize my smart objects once they're placed so that I can
Yep.
completely, and I was like, and someone is going to call me out for that today. And
I will
that's
do a warning. I will
totally
say, by the
fine.
way, Aaron is about to erase part of a smart object. If you do not like this, please take some time to save your own file and
Yes,
make a duplicate of your smart objects and don't erase them, and you'll get through it. Cody says
exactly.
Cody says she does it too. So
Good.
yes.
Okay.
All
Maybe
right.
it's
Well, I'm super pumped to see kind of like what you got going for today. I had a sneak preview of it. Everyone who's watching today, I did have a sneak preview of what it is. I'm personally like doing. I want you to know that I'm doing somersaults internally about it. But so I'm like excited for everyone else to get to see it as well, and I'm pumped just to, especially now that we've kind of talked about how you feel about process and technique and things. I'm really excited to see how you dive into it and like your work as well as just, you know, your thoughts as you go along.
for sure. Yeah. So today, let me switch windows here. I guess I will just minimize that for now. I thought it would be fun to build some sort of a food tower. It's kind of hard to visualize right now because I'm not going to show you guys anything of maybe like a past example of what I've done here. So I'm just shrinking my window down a little bit right here so that I can see it actually. There we go. So I have this collection of images of very, I would say like American foods, theme for the week. And instead of, I don't know, I found in COVID too, like shooting from like my living room, for example, like I don't have all the tools that I would usually have on a big fancy shoot to be able to maybe like hang different foods on top of each other and support them with different themes and everything. So I did this series where I knew that I wanted to stack all these very like American-ish sort of foods. I shot it in the summer. It feels very summer on top of each other. But I didn't know exactly like how I wanted it to be, which is, I think is another reason why I didn't want to like fully try to, you know, challenge the rules of gravity, if you will, trying to create this tower in person and shoot it. So I stacked all of these different elements sort of, as you can see, like 1 by 1 or 2 by 2. I had a rough idea of the order that I was going in.
Yeah, this is really cool because, you know, I think probably many folks in the chat too have also found themselves since the onset of the pandemic realizing that maybe their usual methods of and process of, you know, how they conduct their work is very different. And so this is cool just to see how instead of like rigging this like tower that defies gravity like in a studio, you know, I get to kind of see how you would do it if you're just like, I'm in my living room. I'm at my dining room table.
Exactly. And you know, it was one of the things, like I had one light on hand. I had like some leftover blue seamless, and I was like, you know what? I have all these foods. Like this might be fun. It's kind of a fun challenge too. I think what I like about this sort of approach, even though it might take a little bit longer, is you can really finesse each layer. You know, you're not having gravity smush anything down, but also you can sort of like really play and experiment with what your actual composition is after the fact. So a lot of the times, like a lot of my work is very, very technical, and I don't really have to think too creatively in terms of how I'm going to finalize my image, because I know what it's going to look like because I have a mock-up for a client, or I have a sketch, or I've shot it in such a particular way that there's no surprises. But with something like this, like I think I know, but as we go, you know, oh, I can maybe flip some of the objects, or oh, maybe I noticed that something else might align better here, or it completely doesn't work and I need to find something else. So it's kind of a fun creative exercise for me as well, even though it's totally time consuming and
in a way though, I feel like that's kind of better, at least for me personally, and I don't know about you, chat. Maybe you folks in the community can weigh in on this, but I very frequently, have you ever had that feeling, Aaron, where like you create something sort of permanent, like, you know, if you had created like this tower where everything is like set, you know, and rigged together and everything, and you're like, oh, I'm done, finally. And then you like post an image or you save an image or whatever, and then you wake up the next morning and you look at the piece and you're like, what have I done? Like, you know, like it's not the way that I remember it. It's not, you know, this gives you the opportunity to have all of these wonderful creations like in miniature, you know, and then you can make 2, 3, 4 iterations and then maybe have something that in the morning you're not just like, why did I do everything leaning off to the left? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like you can make that decision. So.
Yeah, there's room for flexibility, and I think, as you were saying, like there's so many different outcomes that can come from sort of this like solo set of photos. Yeah, so the first thing that I did here while actually taking the photos, something that I had to consider was sort of the framing, because you can tell like I pretty much just locked the camera on a tripod. I tried to find something where I knew that it was straight on enough so that even though I'm shooting all of the objects on the same vantage point, that they were pretty straight on, so that there's no loss of perspective as if I'm looking up to the bottle of honey or to down on the bottle of honey, or, you know, anything like that. So
that's what it is. I was kind of feeling that a little bit. I was like, wow, these are very consistent, and I could see them stacked in any order. Honestly.
Exactly. And that's why also a lot of them are like so far away, because I wanted to get a rough idea, you know, just with like how a lens can warp and alter just in camera something. Like I wanted to leave enough room where I could hopefully build it sort of within this frame more or less. So it's a little different, but I have this clean background slate just of the seamless, just the pure blue with no food stains or anything on it that will become my base for this project.
I believe the term for that is that it's isolated. And if any of you folks in the chat are looking to maybe try a project similar to this and follow along, or perhaps this is just, you know, your area of interest when it comes to design, and you are looking for maybe some stock images or something that you can use to do something like this. It took me a while to learn that term, and for a long time I was on Adobe stock, like typing in like lipstick tube on nice pink background, and I was getting like tons of different things. Just type in what you want and then type in the word isolated next to it, and you will thank me. It will give you all of the images that have those nice backgrounds that you're looking for right away. So little tip there for you.
I did not even know that, so thank you. I always search like on clean background if I need something. So
like, hamburger on blue, and Adobe Stock's like, what though? What do you want?
Right. And then it's like in water on a blue plate or whatever. I don't know why a burger would be in water, but here we are. So I am going to start with the burger base. And I think what I'll do is I'll do the selection sort of as we go, and instead of usually like I'll go through, I love Bridge, just like view out my files. It's a little old school, but I can rate things and then sort by rating, and then it's sort of like a little competition in my head, because then I have all the 1 stars and I get to 2 and 3. But I think with something like this, like even though something might be best by itself, it might not necessarily be the best when it's informed by the other objects in the frame. So I think if we take this like one at a time, it may make a little bit more sense. So in terms of like the burger imagery, you know, they all pretty much look the same, but there are a few different variables with the positions of the tomatoes. You can see on this one, like I added a little bit of sauce. And so I think I'm going to go with that one. This is
a very good looking slice of cheese. Like it's just like the dream burger cheese with the corner like hanging out the side like that. And I know he's probably gone now, but I just wanted to compliment this burger on
he
the
is
cheese.
very gone. He was actually a McDonald's burger, because I needed something.
No way.
quick that I then stripped down and dressed up.
Okay.
Corner specifically.
Nice.
But I was like, I'm not gonna get that perfect bun in the grocery store. So I was like, and I can hide the patty with all of the toppings so that I don't have to make anything or buy anything else. I was like, so this is great. So here's our perfect little American burger. What I generally do is just for me, so that I know, like, the image is pretty clean and I think it's pretty well exposed and everything, but I do generally go through on camera raw. I'm working with raw images and do sort of a base adjustment that I then save as a setting, and then I'll just put it over all the images. So I actually already did one for this, just to get that like slate template done. So you can see it's a little bit brighter. I tend to always sort of bring up shadows. It's just a look that I like. And then I tend to like bring contrast down a little bit and then sort of play with the whites and blacks to add sort of more extreme contrast in. I like to add a little bit of clarity and vibrance, but beyond that, like I don't go into too much effort because I do it at the end. That's just how I work. I know you can do a lot with raw images outside of Photoshop, whether you're in Lightroom or Camera Raw through Bridge or through Photoshop directly. Like there's a lot of ways to go about it. You could even do all your base edits and decide that you're not going to do anything else in Photoshop besides composite them all together. But I just like to do it to like just get a little bit sense of a cleaner base image. My images are usually not this clean, so it usually just helps me like get a sense of what it might look like one day when it's done.
Well, I think it already has like kind of that interesting vibe that a lot of your work has. Something that I've noticed, like when I look at your portfolio, is everything has like a really kind of like a vibrance to it, but it's also like very, very sharp and clear. Like there's no mistaking what exactly I'm looking at, you know? And I think that's cool because it's almost in a way, it's like combining nonfiction and fantasy, you know, because it's like there's like here's the stuff, but it's like there's very interesting things happening with it, and I get to like see all of that detail with these great colors. So I love it. I'm getting excited. We've got some comments in the chat. Some people agreeing that yes, they feel that feel when you create something and you post it, and then the next day you're like, what have I created? I've made a monster. What did I do? We got Richard Adams jumping in the chat. Welcome in, Richard. It's good to see you. Bruce also agreeing that his McDonald's hamburgers have never looked this good. And we're talking to Frank here. Let's see. Frank's hungry, and your amazing work is driving him crazy, which I concur. Cody Bear as well was like, yeah, I probably should have had a snack before I arrived today. How often do you get that? Do you get that a lot? I bet.
I get that a lot, but never on set because usually the food is so grossly handled and my studio is very small that it smells like whatever is in the studio. So, you know, a lot of the times, like, you know, it's not just desserts, or it's not just like things that would be lovely to smell for 8 hours a day while you're working with them. It's
like a jar of warm pickles,
right?
Or like
like yogurts, like
just
like
strange
chicken
things.
Fingers was a big one that was like nice at first. But
what was the candied studio like? Was that just like bacon and brown sugar and maple syrup, just like warm for 12 hours?
Yeah, so that was during my residency. So that was like in my living room, and you know, I live in New York, so 2 roommates the whole day were just like, why does it have to smell like bacon all day? Like,
why is it so sticky in here?
I can actually smell like syrup as well. Don't worry, I'm gonna dump that out too. It's very strong and potent.
That's hilarious. And it's like it's such a great looking piece, but when I was looking at it, I was like, this can't have been like an easy cleanup and just like super quick and snappy to like put away when he was done. There's no way that this was over and done with very quick and clean.
It was certainly it was not. And with those, I did a series of those, sort of like visualizing these adjectives through food elements that sort of speak to them, and then I made them into scratch and sniff postcards for Adobe.
Nice.
It was for Adobe Max, I think, a few years ago. But I had to manually apply these like scratch and sniff stickers to what must have been like 1,000 postcards or something, because a lot of people.
My
And
goodness.
so all the other residents had to help me for a few hours apply these bacon scented scratch and sniff. So that was
Yes.
much worse. That was a much worse smell than the actual day of making that image, and they will never let me live it down. And if any of them are watching, I'm still so sorry.
That's so funny though, because I imagine that when you get something that's scratch and sniff, it's like, oh, this is a scratch and sniff strawberry something something, and you smell it and you're like, ooh, I smell strawberries. But I imagine
Right.
that a giant stack of
It
things
was
scratch and sniff scented, that thing, it doesn't smell the same as smelling one serving of
it
scratch and
doesn't.
sniff.
No, especially like I think it was like bacon, one was vanilla, one was a citrus, and
Oh
then so like
man.
all mixed together too. And the bacon, of course, like it was more like a charcoaly grill smell, and it was not a good fake smell.
Oh
Like
no, oh no,
it just
oh gosh.
it
Oh.
was yeah.
That's
I
great
will
though.
probably
Awesome
never live it
effect
down.
though. Wonderful effects though. I think that that's really cool that you were like, I've got this food thing going on. I know people are like seeing it and probably imagining the smell, and I'm gonna give them a smell.
Yeah, it was a good idea. I'll just leave it at that.
Good
People
idea. And
enjoyed
then
it.
you're just kind of like,
People enjoyed receiving them. I don't think they enjoyed making them. So
Awesome.
yeah, so I've placed this. It's a smart object. I'm already going to rasterize it. I'm so sorry,
Here we go.
everyone. I'm
This is
just
your
gonna
warning,
do it.
folks.
It's done.
We just entered the wild, wild west of design.
We did, and with
No
something
telling
like
what's
this,
gonna happen.
like that's like a personal project, I tell myself it's totally okay. Like nobody's gonna yell at me for it. I'm also, one of my New Year's resolutions is to like be better at layering. So I'm just gonna go ahead and try to keep that up.
I tried to do that too, and that's already out the window, and it's not
fair.
even month 2 yet. Like, I do have a habit of like grouping things. Like, I don't name the layers, but when I'm like, okay, here's a segment of like, for example, everything you do on the hamburger, I just like select all of it and group it. And then it's like, I have 722 layers of stuff in this file, but I will, at least know where all the hamburger stuff is, so I kind of do that. That was my like kind of makeshift, secondary kind of promise to myself for the new year that I would do, is just like, okay, I'm definitely not going to name these layers, but I can at least try to save myself some heartache in the future.
It feels better, right? If you're like, just like there might be 722 layers, but it's really 10 elements or something.
Yep.
So what I'm doing here is just sort of cleaning up the base image a little bit. I am going to like eventually select this out, but for my sanity, I always sort of start to clean up these food spills. It's very easy. I just use the patch tool for something like this.
It's one of my favorite tools for this kind of stuff.
Mine too.
I think that I didn't use the patch tool for a very long time, and I was like, kind of like, like what do I need this for? I was predominantly an illustrator, for a very, very long time. And when I started getting into like graphic design, I was just like, well, I'll just get a texture brush and I'll like paint it, or, I'll select it and I'll like color bucket in a region, and then like add a gradient or something, which I guess you can do if you want to be there forever, or you are like really good at kind of create, because some people, like folks who make mock-ups, they can like really jump in with a gradient and the paint bucket tool and make me believe what they're doing. Like this is a 100%. Countertop that you've created and all that stuff. I'm not one of those people.
Me neither.
I'm not.
That's
not me. And so I finally, somebody was like, use the patch tool. And I was like, and then I was doing a daily creative challenge, and I think it was Gus actually that was like, how about the patch tool? And I was like, well, I can't tell So let's try the patch tool. And I fell in love with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, why wasn't I using this like every day to do this? This is so good.
That's how I feel about 50% of the tools on the toolbar. It's like, I feel like I try to teach people the patch tool a lot because I do feel like it's pretty undervalued. Just in general, especially with photo retouching, it might seem a little scary, but it's hard to teach. But because you kind of have to just like get a feel for how you like to use it the best and like how it works for you. And so once you get that down, people come around.
We have a comment in the chat real quick. Sorry. Fairy says, how do you make that burger look shiny and really smooth? I think you're kind of going along that path right now as you started to kind of like remove little specks and stuff until it just looks like the perfect like legendary bun.
Yeah, so it's definitely a multifaceted approach. I think first thing I do is try to get it to look as good as it possibly can in camera. So with this burger, I replaced the cheese. I used a little blowtorch to melt that corner down. With something like the burger bun to get it sort of extra shiny. Luckily with McDonald's burgers, like they're already pretty kind of oily,
pretty glossy,
spongy and glossy. But I do, have a range of tools that I use. I think with this, I did like take a little olive oil and just brush it on with like a paper towel.
Nice.
Just to get some more reflection than you usually would. You can sort of see some of the spots there.
And you said with a paper towel, so that means you didn't like put like a dollop of oil on this. You just like very lightly kind of like brush the surface just to give it that shine.
Exactly.
Nice.
And I think it really just depends on like the food that you're working with. I have spray bottles with olive oil. I have like spray deodorants that I use for fruits.
Really?
Just because it makes them look waxier instead of shiny.
Oh, okay.
I have paintbrushes, obviously. But with something like this, where the oil obviously wasn't going to absorb into a pretty processed piece of food, I thought like just a little paper towel spot would do the job a little bit better than a brush or something where it would maybe just like bead and fall off. So that's the first step. And a lot of food styling, I think, is just sort of learning as you go, trial and error. It's sort of like reverse psychology of cooking because you're not looking to make things taste good, which is what I think the motive primarily is for cooking, but you're really just cooking and prepping things enough to look good, which is a weird mindset to live in when you work all day and then go to cook dinner or something and realize that you're still in that mindset.
Yeah, so, I didn't even think about that, but you're absolutely right. It is kind of reverse cooking. It's like you're doing everything. You're trying to make like visually the same thing, but you're actually not doing any of it the way that you're technically supposed to.
Exactly.
It's like fake magic food.
Exactly. Yeah, especially with like meats. So with this burger, for example, I've styled shoots before with hamburgers where you cook them in an oven so that they're like evenly baked, and then you take shoe polish and you paint on the charcoal marks.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So, yeah, it's a fun time. So the second part, though, of course, is the retouching to get it even more perfect. I think with this project specifically too, I just want everything to look as perfect and presentable as possible. That's something that I like to achieve in my work, and I don't know if that's sort of leftover habit from the fashion world and making things look super glossy and sort of attainable but unattainable, or like relatable but sort of like in this case like scary perfect.
Scary perfect. Love it. I love it.
Yeah. Especially with a burger like this. So yeah, I've just gone in with a patch tool and a little like cloning on the lower opacity and very feathered to sort of like smooth out everything.
Just kind of giving it like a subtle legendary element.
Yeah.
Like very.
And I totally should have done that on a different layer, but I didn't.
But hey, we talked about this though. We've already like had our disclaimer, Aaron. You are in the clear. You're fine. We issued a warning twice.
We did, and I'm sure there will be more to come. So what I'm going to do now is it's a little slanted, if you can tell, the top of the burger. So I'm just going in and liquefying just to like get the top a little bit poofier, because it is our base element. So I don't want to like lose sort of the gravity and the presence of this burger under everything else, but I'm also just rounding it out to be a little bit smoother.
So when you use liquefy, it's looking like you are kind of using like a very large brush to move things. Liquefy is, if I can make a confession, liquefy terrifies me. Every time I have ever tried to use it, I mean, granted, I'm usually like painting faces and not using it on inanimate objects. So every time I open liquefy, it's like instant nightmare fuel. It's just not. It's not but I'm loving like kind of what, like I would never think, like your brush right now, you could fit your entire subject inside of it, but
I totally could,
how
and
you're
I could
moving.
Yeah, I think.
Why didn't I think of that? Oh no.
If you, for me, like liquefy is a really good way. If you think about it as you're changing sort of perspective, instead of changing actual shapes, it's a little less daunting.
Okay.
So I like to use a bigger brush. I usually keep the center sort of off to the side so that when I'm clicking and dragging, like I know exactly how I'm pushing and pulling just on the outer perimeter of the brush. So I'm just sort of going in, making it look sort of more shapely and even, and doing not only the top bun but the bottom to make sure that instead of going in on the actual object and rotating the canvas or anything like that, I'm adjusting it manually because everything else was shot from the same angle. I don't want to like have everything at too varied of angles. Which is a little intense, but
but you said something that I actually think is really incredible, something that I've never actually thought of when it comes to liquefy, and something that I think is really clever is you use that big brush and it's almost like you're changing the perspective of something rather than like focusing on trying to transform the shape of your subject. You're like changing the perspective of it, and I think that's really great because I just watched you do it, like kind of dragging that center out. It made it look like it was like kind of flipped in space, and I've never used the liquefy tool to do that, so I think that's super clever.
Yeah, thank you. I think too, if you do start to use too small of a brush, that's when you can sort of start to see the destruction on the pixels, and you can start to see even in the background, I don't know how well it translates, but you can see that those look like they're pulled. So if you
kind of a melting weirdness.
And that could be really cool if I was looking to do something super, surreal and abstract and whatnot, but not in this case. So with a bigger brush, it's sort of easy to cheat it in that way, where if I'm pulling, this many pixels, I think I'm at 2300 on the brush size, like it's so much harder to tell, especially in the background. It still looks pretty clean. And so, if you think about perspective instead of sort of manipulation, it changes the way that you approach the tool in general, I think. And it's super handy for me in what I do and how I like to work.
Yeah, now we have like a nice tall full burger. And I love it. I'm into it. I think this looks great. One thing I do want to call attention to as well, just because I know that a lot of folks are jumping in here to kind of see what you're working on and what you're doing today. But we are, kind of early in our Adobe Live Day, and I see some new folks have kind of filed into the chat. So I would like to take just a few moments here real quick to kind of pull up the schedule and just remind folks that, we're hanging out here, but we are not the end of the day. We did have Rework It and Daily Creative Challenges earlier today. I think there was a slight hiccup with the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. just before this stream, but you could still watch that archived video on YouTube and here on Behance. So never fear, it is available for you to check out still. Obviously, I'm here with Aaron right now, but right after this, we are going to have the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Andrew Huckrattle. It is a replay, just like the Photoshop DCC was replay. Then Alex Lazarus is going to be with us at noon Pacific time, doing packaging design, which I'm pretty excited about. And then the replay, it looks like the Daily Creative Challenge is going to be redone for Photoshop at 2 p.m. today, I'm seeing. And then we're going to end the day with the draw along with Kyle T. Webster, who many of you know is fabulous, and I'm sure you want to check out all that stuff. So definitely stay tuned and keep hanging out with us throughout the day, because there's going to be a lot of pretty nifty things happening on Adobe Live this afternoon. Or morning or night, time appropriate terms, because I know that we have a very international audience. But yeah.
I'm like, should I just stay on all day and watch everything? Maybe.
That's kind of what I end up doing. Like, I am going to be back for the other 2-hour segment later today. And at that point, it'll basically be like I'm taking a 20 to 30 minute break in between streams. Because I don't need to watch my own daily creative challenge. And I'll definitely be back this evening or afternoon, as it were. So I typically find myself in that situation where there's enough cool stuff going on and enough things to learn that I have my hands pretty full with deciding kind of what to watch. And I think that this is a pretty cool place in general to learn new things, regardless of what you actually do. Like, I'm an illustrator and a painter. And you are, a photographer, but do we not just totally have a Step Brothers bonding moment over the liquefy feature? It was very cool. So, all you folks in chat who are, kind of looking at the schedule and thinking maybe that there's nothing specifically on today that is your preferred area of expertise or your preferred creative discipline, check it out anyways, because you really can learn a lot of different things. And in general, I think something that you can glean from all of our guests that we have is, no matter what work you do and no matter what work they do, you can always ask for advice and insight on what it's like to be a professional working in the industry and how one goes about conducting business, which I think is relevant, no matter what somebody is working on. Of course, maybe the way that I do commissions and, illustrate video game items is different than you, Aaron, who are, doing what you're doing now, kind of editing these photos and having taken that photo shoot and everything. Our work is different and how we find work is different. But I think basic, conducting ourselves in a business-like manner and communicating with clients and showcasing our work in a manner that can find us more work in the future is relatively the same. So let us know if you have any questions. I know that I'm happy to answer, and I know that Aaron is pumped to answer as well.
For sure. I've often found no matter what someone's creative discipline is, there's such a shared camaraderie with just knowing that it's a different mindset and a different approach to a job or to business that is so hard for maybe clients or customers to understand, that there's actually a lot of shared overlap and experiences with how to sort of navigate a lot of parts of the creative industry, for lack of a better term. So yeah, we are here. So I just went in and I just cleaned up the edge of the burger a little bit more.
Nice.
Just getting rid of some of maybe the burns or the
Ooh, I love seeing the before and after so much.
So another confession, because I realized I totally just did this without thinking, is I make a copy of the layer that I'm working on if I'm going to physically alter it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I went in with the clone tool. I went in with the paintbrush even just on the hue and the color, and then like dodge and burn just to sort of fill out this corner. And I went back in with the smaller liquify actually just to round this out a little bit more. But if I know that I'm directly editing on top of an image and it might not go as planned or part of it might work, I just do another second destructive layer just in case I screw it up, and then it all looks good. I don't think I need to like mask anything out. So then I'll just like combine them back at the end instead of saving all the layers. It's another totally just way that I've taught myself how to work. Sometimes
hey, it works.
Get up to 5 different layers, or partially, and then in that case I'll group them all in a folder, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I think for now this is a good start for my burger. I might still go in later and change even more about it, but I think for now, like that's a good working base in terms of shape of what I need to build on top.
Yeah, I'm loving it. And that is not, I just realized that's kind of a McDonald's pun right as I said it. Right, and I was like, oh no. Oh,
I would not have caught that, so it is.
I'm becoming a dad. You'll allow it, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'll allow it. It's a safe place. So I wasn't sure if I wanted the honey on top of the burger. When I was shooting it, it felt a little bit too monochromatic with the color of the bun and maybe the color of the honey. And I also started to notice that the way that the light went through the honey, it was super interesting to me just to give it a little bit more depth. So I did end up taking some photos of corn after that because I thought maybe just to break it up, it's cool texture. It's another sort of more solid object to build upon. So I think I'm gonna go with the corn before the honey. I'm sure some of you are probably wondering why I didn't just edit the photo of these two things stacked together in the first place. But I think, and you'll see once I place the file, like it does, actually I can show you here and here, like it, no matter when you're starting to put things on top of these images, they start to smush down a little bit. And you can always edit that back out. But I thought that also with just the shadow range on top of everything, like it was a little bit too busy. So I think based on seeing what I have coming up with the honey, I'm going to stick with, and I know that these are the exact same image, but I will stare at this for 20 minutes, usually debating like which one is better, but I think I will go with this guy.
I will say that I like the one that you chose the best because my eyes catch that it is like quarter turn, just like slightly more, and we have like that more rounded like end on that corn right there that I think is really lovely. So sometimes I think like when I'm talking, I talk with my mom about my art a lot because my mom is like always very interested in what I'm doing. And sometimes like I'll have one of these moments with her where I'm just like, I can't figure out which one. And she's like, and the difference is, and I'm like, trust me, mom, there's more like core of corn in this left image than in the right image. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, it's real, okay? It's very real.
It's very real, and I'm sure that everybody watching totally agrees. I think, especially when you're dealing with such sort of clean and straightforward looking images, like the details really do make a difference. And the more like visual interest that's there and the more interesting sort of shapes and textures that you can get, like the more interesting the overall image is. I'm very like, I get very overwhelmed when creating if there's a lot going on in the frame. You can totally tell by my work. And so for me, like to be able to know that it's sort of like a clean frame looking out, but then when you go in that there's maybe more going on is very satisfying to me. So we have our corn, I've rasterized it, it's fine. It is a little bit different from where the other, where our base burger is. I think I did end up shifting the tripod up a little bit because I realized that things were going to pile a little bit higher than I thought, but it's totally okay. What I like to do, maybe I shouldn't have rasterized it yet, it's okay, is I just turn down the opacity and I'll try to size this up to match. I'm not changing it too much, so I think it's it's fine. And I'll just sort of try to match up. The priority really is like where the two objects intersect. In this case, it's
That's
the
like
bun.
really close.
It's pretty close. And that's sort of the
Yeah.
nice thing, that even if I accidentally like nudge the camera or have to shift it a little bit, like I know that there's enough consistency between the two that it's totally okay.
Well, it feels like right enough that with the opacity down on the corn layer, the shape and dome of that burger fills in behind, and it looks like it's all connected properly, like through itself, which I think is really cool. So
Yeah.
I think that looks really good. Also, we've got some more folks kind of filing in. Looks like Mallory says, "Hi everyone, sorry I'm late. Welcome in, Mallory. It is good to see you again, my friend." Jillian is hungry now. We're getting a lot of that. Jessica talking about food styling sorcery. I agree. It is all magic to me. This is like Hogwarts, but food today. And Gabriella says, I agree with Val about the mom thing. That happens to me with my dad all the time. Yeah, and I'm sure there's like, people like get that from their like maybe like non-creative friends, who like they don't really create art themselves. So then like when you just like show someone that just doesn't quite get it about, like little things like that, people are like, okay, you're a crazy artist, that's fine. And I'm like, I accept this, that's fine. Marcia, it's good to see you, Marcia. Welcome in. Please let us know if you have any questions in the chat. I feel like I'm getting to like hog up all of the question time, and I get to ask Aaron whatever I want to ask him. But please let us know if you have any questions or wonders about either what Aaron is doing, or if you have any questions on, like what it's like to conduct business as a photographer, or something of the like. I'm sure that we can kind of put our heads together and talk about business and clients and things too, if that's what you folks are interested in. I do have another question for you actually, Aaron, and that is, sure. So when you start to kind of cut these photos and start editing them, and you're kind of like piecing out what exactly you're going to put in this tower. Maybe for those of you who are jumping into the chat right now and we're here at the very beginning, we are creating a tower of food today, which I'm very pumped about. You said, some of you may be thinking, why didn't I simply edit the images of these two items together? And you had the reason that, if you start doing that, then things get really busy and they have like their own shadows, and sometimes they're in different directions and all that kind of stuff. So when you start cutting things out, then do you go in and create your own shadows then, or do you still try to kind of use the existing ones from the photo?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it really just depends on like what it is. With something like this, for example, I will use the shadow on the bun, and maybe the buns, even though I'm realizing all that time like cleaning up this edge, like some of this bun will be used in the final photo probably. So, but what won't be there is probably like the shadows that we're starting to see on where the burger got smushed, because we don't have that same sort of indent that we have on the other image. So I cleaned this up a little bit, and then now I'm going to cut it out into place, and I can sort of start to show you like how I mesh those two things together.
Yes, I'm very excited.
With my method. So I'm a big fan of color range. I don't know.
Yes.
It's just, especially working sort of a lot and primarily of the times with in studio solid colored photographs. It's just the easiest thing for me to do, to be able to quickly mask something out. It's never perfect, and sometimes I'll do like a little bit less of a range if it has to be like super precise around the edges. But with something like this, I feel like because everything is sort of on the same lighter blue color, like it's okay if some of the image does disappear. So I go ahead, I wait for my program to respond, and then it'll be masked. I did want to add too. So going back to the whole mom thing, I have two brothers, and when I first started getting into photography, I was in middle school, early high school, and I would edit. Like I would do these shoots, and then I would like edit immediately in my room because I was so excited. And my older brother was right across the hall, and he's very analytical and very like organized. And so I would always edit something like a few different ways and wait for him to look at them, and I would ask his opinion, and I would always say like, oh, which one do you like best, or what do you think? And whichever one he liked best, I would always throw out, and then I would keep the other one because it meant that he didn't get it, like he didn't understand. And so so sometimes I still text him. I'm like, can you tell me which one you like better here, and tell me why? Sorry.
So I know which one to throw in the trash.
Exactly. So sometimes it helps to get the opposite. This is frozen for me for whatever reason.
Oh no.
I am locked up. Apologies.
Well, maybe do we need to let it cool off, or because sometimes that works, or do we need to?
Yeah, it's weird because I can totally move everything around, and it doesn't look like there are any windows that I'm missing. Like
sometimes if you hit escape real quick, maybe there's something for whatever reason that you can't see. I'll hit escape, and then it'll like close whatever it is that's blocking me. But
got nothing. I think I just have to restart this. So this is also a good lesson in saving your work a little bit more often.
Oh no.
oh, here we go. Okay.
Hey, okay, save your work.
I screwed that up, but I'm gonna save this first, and then I'll go back in and do that selection really quick.
Okay.
I'm just gonna save this as day 1. All right, crisis averted. I was waiting for that to happen at some point, so hopefully that we just got that out of the way and we're good.
Yeah, everyone now at home, save your work. Also, we did have some questions come in for you.
Sure.
Bruce is asking you a question, and I just called you by his name. So Bruce says, does the kind of camera affect the quality of your images?
I think it depends. I think, with something like studio photography, it is beneficial, obviously, to have a DSLR because, you have to sync it with lights that are compatible. And so it's really hard, as far as I know, to sync strobes with a cell phone. I know that they exist, but I also think at the same time, you could totally do the same setup outside with direct sunlight and your phone and get the same sort of clarity and depth. I've never been a super technical person in terms of what excites me about photography and image making in general. Like it's always about the tactile experience and sort of documenting whatever I'm creating and getting it to that point. And I'll use whatever technology I have to get to that point, but I've never been someone that is super caught up on what lens is out there or what camera body is out there, personally for me. So I do think like you can sort of, it's always beneficial, of course, to feel empowered by the tools that you're using and the equipment that you're using to create. But I think that there are many, many ways to go about getting the same results or similar results in different ways.
If I can add to that,
yes, please.
I will say this is kind of another way in which like two people from completely different backgrounds that are doing totally different work can kind of chime in on the same thing. Before I was sort of like a full-time artist, which I'm very lucky and able to do now. I was a Twitch streamer, and I was like, I'm gonna be like the best Hearthstone player ever. And I started streaming in like 2014, and I spent a lot of years over on Twitch, like streaming and like trying to like be the cool streamer, the same way that like a lot of people try to be like the photographer. You know what I mean?
Or
And it turns out that I'm really bad at Hearthstone, and that dream was destroyed. And then I started painting more regularly, and now I'm here. But one of the things that I realized through years and years of streaming and wanting to like build this streaming thing for myself and make it like what I perceived other people's experience and awesome like streamer life to be that I saw on social media, is that I thought I had to have like all of these things. I gotta have like the green screen, I gotta have the studio lights, I gotta have like this super awesome like streaming camera, I've gotta have like a bunch of monitors, and I've gotta have like the RGB headset, you know, mouse and keyboard combo, and like all this stuff that like when you go to Instagram or you go to Twitter or wherever and you type in like streamer, you see like these wicked setups with like these, you know, gaming racer chairs and all that stuff. And the truth is, none of that actually really matters until you get going. When you are, especially if you're a beginner streamer, just like if you're a beginner designer, I think that one of the worst decisions that you can make for yourself is spending all of your money on like incredible cameras that you probably don't even know how to use, you know, like you don't have the experience to be using them anyways. And you know, you spent all this money on all of these things that you think you need, when what you really should be focusing on is your content. What I found through years and years of worrying that I didn't have enough and I didn't look cool enough was that I was worrying about that and not focusing on truly enjoying what I was creating and presenting to people and showing the truth of my passion for my work to an audience. And I think that if you can do those things, you can love what you're doing and show the world that you love what you're doing. It doesn't matter how much money you spent on your equipment. People are going to be like, wow, that's an awesome thing that you made. And so don't kill your bank accounts trying to be the cool photographer. Just make something you love.
it's true. I always used it as an excuse growing up, like, oh well, I don't have a big fancy camera, so oh, I don't have like a studio that I can work in, so I can't create the images that I want. But then I was forced to figure out to create images that I could make at the time, and then I could, you know, slowly expand from there once you do start to have access to equipment. But
Yeah,
I think
build
what
it
you
as you
said
go,
is
right?
and I think what you said is dead on with just it's more about the actual content than the tools that you're using to create, because there are so many ways, as we know, to create, that there's no really wrong answer. So yeah, there is a lot of like interdisciplinary crossover.
I think
shared experience,
because we're like kind of like still like, even if we're, you know, if we've done different things, we're still like kind of on a broadcast like presenting. And I think the nature of so many different kinds of like online jobs right now is that there's also like an element of like being an influencer, even if you're an inside cat like me, where everyone's like, you are such an extrovert, and I'm like, I'm in my house and I am in my pajamas from the waist down. I'm not. I'm not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. But you know, so there's like this like, you know, kind of interesting similarity between like the things that we have to do, you know, communicating with clients, you know, presenting the work and doing the work and stuff. That's kind of fun to like find the differences. But we have more questions. We have more questions for you. They're kind of like rolling in now. Jessica Tam has a question for you that I'm also dying to know, with one specific image. She says, how were you able to place all those items on top of the burger without having it looked weighed down? It's probably some food styling trick I'm not aware of. And I think Cody kind of jumped in and said that you're editing two photos together, except that you have the picture of the burger with the honey bottle turned on its head and like jutting like to the side from like the top of the burger, and I wanted to know how the heck you did that. So like these are two photos edited, but like how did you do the
I like that.
Yeah.
Honestly,
You didn't just set it there. Don't tell me that.
I counted three and I let go with my hand and I did it out of the
Oh,
shot.
okay, cool. Because I was gonna be like, if you were like, actually,
That,
I just set it
no,
down and I just put it on top of the burger and it stayed for me.
no, you can see what that looks like. A lot of the times I'll use like a tweezer if I know that I want something to look balanced instead of directly, if things are feeling like too flat while they're stacked, which we'll totally get to, then I'll, try to angle things with a tweezer. Or
Gotcha.
my favorite tool are these like skewer rods that,
Nice.
I can sort of hold into place. But sometimes, honestly, it's a bad habit that I've gotten into, especially with no one else on my sets, is I'll just throw things around, see what works. Like with something like this, I was like, oh, maybe upside down. No, I don't think it's gonna work anyway. But yeah.
No, I really love it. But when you were going through and I was just like, okay, one of these things is not like the other. Like everything else is like laying on its side. And then there's just this one. And you were like, yeah, sometimes I have to like use like props and things to like stand stuff up. And I see the skewers and some and the tweezers. And I'm like, but that one's magic. And
pure art of the photo, right?
Yeah, you'd like accidentally snuck one of your Hogwarts photos in there. And I was like, wait a second.
Sometimes, especially if I know that there's like a lot of things to be shot or work to be done, I will just literally do that and let it go and hope that it works and have that option. And if I truly think that something like that's gonna work, then I will like balance it and whatnot. But in that case, it was not one of those things.
You just put the edge of that shadow in and it looked good.
Like, I was just gonna boop, wait, and but I didn't. I'm sorry. I will explain it though.
This is great. Yeah, let me see this because that was clean, my friend. That was clean.
You think okay, cool. Thank you. Then I feel pretty good about it. So basically, when you do the color adjust, it gives you this inverted sort of everything that you selected, right? Mm-hmm. So I selected all the blue to get everything else that wasn't blue isolated, and it gave me, something like this where. Okay, where'd the corn go? That's weird. That's not what I want. So I just invert it and then I'll go in on the actual layer with my brush. And the first thing that I'll do is like paint out any areas that weren't necessarily perfect or that were missing to make sure that like I'm truly just editing or getting that like isolated area that I want. Yeah. And then from there, I sort of just like paint it in. So
yeah, that looks like it belongs. Like, sweet. I love it.
Yeah, so with this, it's actually, even though I spent all that time like smoothing out the bun and getting the shape was still important to see like what this side of the bun should look like and to make sure that, there is, if I go back in and I start to paint in a little bit more, like I could alter the sesame seeds here, but I do think it's like clean enough that like I don't need that like dark of a shadow there. And then I can just go in and make sure that all of my sesame seeds here are whole. With something like these two, like maybe I'll keep this one in and this one in, and they're actually from two different images, but I'm not going to worry about like the guys back here.
That's just a really nice way though that they are two different images, and I would never think that like glancing at this at first, but even though it's like two different images and like positions of burger too, they fit together so nice right there. So
yeah, and then with this like sauce overlap, for example, like I just went in and I painted out where that other bun can cut in. I know in this full image, if I look at the inverse here, not to confuse anyone, but there is more shadow from the corn. But I do think that this sort of allows a little bit more flexibility with like creating that separation for now. The other thing to consider is this might leave a little bit more of a shadow on the ground. I don't really have that right now. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate the layer. I'll sort of like look at the clean image again. I just want to see like what the difference is. And the only difference really is this like point, I think. And I can't tell if that's coming from the top of the corn or just the different position of that leaf. I'm pretty sure it's the leaf now that I look at it, but there really isn't anything leaving a shadow on the ground. So I'm personally just not going to worry about it because I do think that this looks pretty solid.
Yeah, actually, now that you like, I think if I, didn't go back and like look at the other photo, I would assume that I had to like add a bunch of extra stuff onto the surface there. But you're right, it really doesn't leave that much. So you can pretty much just leave it as is and continue to elaborate on other elements.
I think I will for now. I think that looks good. So I think the next thing will be the honey. I could use this one. I could try, but it's not, I guess I didn't shoot it to be on the corn. I do really like how that you can see
like the caustics.
Yeah, like I got lazy with not rigging this at all and just used my hand for a literal shadow. So I might have to like composite a few honey bottle images together to form a full honey.
I'm here for it though, like, because I was wondering, like, what happens if you have, like, a honey bottle that you really want to use, but part of it is obscured in a way that you have to edit. But then what if the honey levels are different in those two bottles? Like, how do you kind of clean it up and make it look cohesive? So I'm very excited.
We are gonna get there. So I think the priority here is just looking at like, this is the final angle of the corn that we used. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I want my bottle angled a little bit more than it would be if it was just straight on. I think straight on is just feeling very stacked and there's no negative space between the elements to breathe. But now I can sort of start to cheat the height a little bit by having some sort of angled, gravity defying sort of honey. So I know that I'm going to line this up with the corn. And I think maybe on these images, that was just for shadow anyway, just in case. But I do think that this is a little off angle wise. But if I'm starting to look at these, this feels a little bit more dead on. So maybe.
Yeah. Has more of that round on the end there, I think.
Yeah, I think I like this one because I feel like that might just start to look too unrealistic. But between those, maybe that. Okay, so I have a few selects. This is how I generally do it. And then I have these three. I don't know. I kind of been feeling this one over here. I think the angle is nice. The corn is a little bit more angled though.
Yeah, I think the one on the right might have the closest angle to your corn a little bit, but then the one on the very left has a lot more of that like golden amber glow on top of the corn that
which
I
is
love.
Kind of nice. Okay,
yeah.
Let's go with that one. I think that's a good idea. So that
like, don't make me choose for you.
No,
but
it's kind of fun.
Give my input a little bit.
Choose your own adventure food tower.
As long as you don't treat me like your brother and be like, which one do you like now? All right, this one's going. This one is clearly the worst choice.
I trust
would have just been like, okay, hungry boy.
Definitely trust you.
Okay.
To be fair, a lot of the times, like the images were also him or my other brother. So I think it was like a little bit too close to home.
I think that something Terry White has said on Adobe Live before is that he never ever does his editing around the model because like people can't really take in images of themselves objectively. They can't, like, they look at it and they're just like for me, whenever I look at pictures of myself, I'm just like, why is my hair puffier on the right side again? Why, like, why do I look like I'm trying not to laugh? Like, what's wrong with me?
That nobody else notices. I know doing like an artist portrait or self-portrait is one of my least favorite things to do.
Yep. And then everyone else is like, it's so great. And I'm like, don't you dare put it on Facebook though. Like, don't do that to me. And they're like, but I already did. And all of your grandparents think it's great. I'm like, great. That's wonderful. Appreciate it
so much.
I just look like I'm horrified, like on the side of a family photo now. And I feel really I hate it. And everyone's like, look.
Like, awesome.
But you know what though? I think at least when it comes to family members and photos, I don't think that it's it's not like what we're used to, like, being in
very true.
in this sphere. And I have to remember that my aunts and uncles just want to be able to tell people how big I've gotten. Like, that's all they want.
That's all they want.
Just look at Val, look how big she's gotten. That's all they want.
Right.
So I have to let them have that.
It's a different priority.
Yes.
So I've lined up the corn-ish. I think it's pretty good. And you might notice I even didn't rasterize this yet till it was placed. Just a little.
Gasp.
I know. So now I'm going to do it. But
okay. All right.
I did wait to scale it beforehand, just a little bit. So I'm a little.
At least wait to scale it. You will not regret it. One of the things too, and I mean, you've got your kind of process down pat, so no need for you to change your process at all. But maybe if there's anyone in the chat that also does this, because I do this myself sometimes, one of the things that I have started doing rather than rasterizing when I know that I can't, like kind of like you said, Aaron, is like, when I'm working on personal projects, I allow myself to do this because it doesn't matter. But then you get to the situation where, you're working on a client project and you have maybe the last couple things you did were personal. And then you're like, now I can't like work as quick and seamlessly and comfortably as I want because they might, ask me to change some things. And trust me, if you ever go into a client project thinking, I'll just rasterize this, they're not going to ask me to change it. That's the moment your world crumbles.
That's true.
That's the moment things go bad. Like, don't ever assume that your clients are never going to ask you to change something because they probably will.
It's a bad habit to get into.
Yes, it really is. But if you rasterize your stuff and you work on your personal projects that way, and you're looking for an alternative to like adding and subtracting to your photos when you're working on client work, get comfortable with masks. Get comfortable with masking and everything, because typically what I will do is I will mask things to like cut giant chunks. I don't know what it is about me, and maybe you're the same way. It's like I always want to like just use my eraser and just like remove huge chunks of my images. Like I'm just like, I could do without this, and I just like want to just like take them out of there. But I've been using masks a lot just to kind of go in and do things a little different. So
masks are a lifesaver, and it did take me a while to get into them as well.
Masks and clipping masks.
Clipping masks, yes.
Oof.
I'm also realizing now I never technically masked this burger for the clean background for the that we had, so I'm just gonna do that really quickly as well. Not that it like really matters. I think like it allowed a pretty clean background anyway. But just for the sake of knowing that this background was perfectly clean, I think I will do it to show.
I think sometimes the certain steps are necessary, if only because your eye might twitch the entire time you haven't done it while you're working.
Exactly.
Let me see. Cody says, I'm a very destructive artist. I know what you mean. Cody. Because I'm just like, I'm Val. I sometimes teach the Daily Creative Challenge. I know how to use Photoshop. Thumbs up. And then as soon as the cameras turn off, sometimes I'm just like, where are all the tools I shouldn't be using for this?
How can I do this
being
quicker?
a professional does not necessarily mean that you are consistent in your process 100% of the time too, by the way. Like, do you ever fall into that trap, Aaron, where you're just like, well, I'm this now, so I got to do things, A, B, and C now. And then you're just like, but I don't feel comfortable doing that. So then like when no one's looking, you just do, what you wanted to do in the first place. I do that all the time. All the time, folks.
All the time. Because I think, again, there's so many different ways to do something. And if you know that somebody else does it a different way, or especially like other professionals that you're like, oh, they must have done it this way. I really need to start doing that. It doesn't always work though, because you're so used to how you get things done and how it works for you. And I think as long as you can still have that flexibility to edit and alter and be, flexible for whatever client needs, and it's totally okay to continue with your process however you need to.
The pleasure of creation is a big point when it comes to choosing what's right for your process. I think I said something similar earlier. It's like, it's not always about like, what you should or shouldn't use. Sometimes it's just like what you like the most. And, that's what's best for your project. Let me make sure I'm not missing any messages here. Fairy says, do you usually boost the saturation of your photo to make it pop?
I do. It's something that I like to do at the end. What I'll do is, and I'm sure we'll get to that, is I do a bunch of sort of like adjustment layers in a group folder. So
nice.
Just to keep all the elements sort of the same as I go and to see how they work in relation with each other, because I don't want to manually sort of tweak each element, because it might not just be as consistent as it would be if I treated it as like a whole image at the end. So I do that initial camera raw filter where I boost some of the vibrance and I make sure that the clarity is there and sort of like get the base sort of levels and everything that I want. But yes, I wait till the end to make sure that it's all consistent and together.
Gotcha. Mallory says, I've come to the conclusion that creatives by nature are introverts, not to be confused with shy, just happy to get energy from their own time alone. I think that's really important, not to be confused with shy, just happy to get energy from their own time alone. I think that's a very great way of putting it, because I'm not a shy person by like any stretch of the word, but I'm not extroverted, and I think that's a great way of putting it. I kind of resonate with that. What about you, Aaron?
I think I agree. I think sometimes, I don't know, it's a delicate balance, I think. Sometimes I love being alone and editing, and even today I'm like, oh wow, I've never talked through this process before. Like usually I just go in a zone, right? And I zone out, and then 3 hours later I come out with Food Tower and I'm like, oh cool. Where was I during that time?
Yeah. Have I eaten?
Right.
In the last 6 hours?
It's sort of like a really good like workout, or in school like a really good test, like an AP test, when you come out and you're like, I don't know how I did that, but like that was satisfying. Like I got through that, and like do I, and I'll do it again tomorrow. But then there are also some days where I'm so in my head about editing or so unsure that I'm like, I could really use some outside interaction, and maybe that's not like being in that zone, or maybe that's just like a need to like refresh or to take a step back. I think that's also a very important part of the creative process, is allowing yourself time to think and breathe. Going back to when I was in high school, showing my brother, images from across the hall, I would make such like rash decisions, and I would want to get them out in the world so quickly. So he would decide, I would pick the opposite. I would upload it to like Flickr or whatever, like showing my age again, like very immediately. And then when I started to get older, I was like, maybe I'll have dinner first so that I have 20, 30 minutes to get that back. And then I'll realize like, oh, my color balance is off. Or like, oh, all I needed was a moment away. I'm sure even tonight, like when I open this again tomorrow, I'll be like, oh, I didn't catch that. Like this does actually need a shadow, or, so I think like allowing yourself breaks from the process is just as important as like really zoning in and embracing it as well.
Definitely. I think flipping your canvas can do that as well. At least in my experience as a painter or illustrator, I flip my canvas horizontal a lot of time, just to kind of give it's kind of the equivalent of like stepping away from my piece for a couple of hours and then coming back. It's like instantly I see it with new eyes. And I mean, it might be kind of interesting to try it during your process here, since you are building like a tower, because I think you probably would be surprised at how it may be leaning to the left or right, when you don't notice it because you're staring at it, one way for so long. It can be super interesting just to see like you know, the reality versus your perception of
That's a great idea.
what you're working on. And another question has come through from Fairy. Says, how do you remove that thing from the Bear honey bottle? I assume that
That's
Fairy,
next.
you're talking about the little, yeah, the little pliers or tweezers there.
Yeah.
I'm very excited because
Yeah.
I imagine that it's going to be similar to watching those satisfaction videos where like someone like makes something squeaky clean, or like the pressure washer.
Sure.
I know that I'm getting old because my idea of fun used to be eating dirt and like playing with worms, and now it's watching an old man pressure wash his driveway on YouTube.
I was gonna say, have you seen like the ones with cleaning the rugs? Because those are a new sort of like quarantine habit, and it made me think similar. Like, when did I get here? Like,
when did I get to the point where I was just like, you know what I need in my life is a really good home carpet cleaner. Right? I need a carpet shampooer machine. That's what I need. Ooh, it's yes. True. And it's, you know what? Right? Change your life. It'll change your life.
Now I can't wait.
I have on occasion, actually, my grandmother has one. She's loaned it to me. I was in the middle of a really big project one time, and I turned on the carpet shampooer and I moved all the furniture in my living room and I shampooed the carpets. And I was sitting there like, this is so satisfying, but I'm like, you know, almost 30 going on 60 right now, and I need to slow my roll before this gets out of hand. Calmed me down though. It was great.
Listen, there are definitely worse things too.
Yes.
So I'm sure you're like, if that's what you're doing, that's amazing.
My living room is spotless, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely.
It's spotless.
So what I did here is I just cleaned up the mask. You can sort of tell, like, this is hard just because with the kernel overlaps, like, because the corn was not perfect, like it's not going to be a perfect transfer, sort of more or less like the top of the burger bun was. So I just went in and sort of manually painted out in my mask, the kernels that made sense for the shadow from the honey, and then sort of like morphed them in with the corn layer underneath. It's not, like I said, perfect again, like you can tell sort of right here. So, and then I also changed the shape of the corn, just using the end of this corn merging with the actual corn from the corn image. So, you know, I could go in and clean out this area.
Glancing at this, though,
I'm on the wrong layer.
I'm telling you, I didn't even notice that until you like circled around it with your cursor.
Yeah.
And you're like right here, and I'm like, oh,
which
okay.
You can't really tell.
But I didn't know.
So I could go back in and just sort of like with a very like loose feather, sort of just go in and mess that out. And then, you know, we start to have that shape a little bit more defined. And then maybe to blend that in a little bit more, something that I can start doing is I'll go in and I want to sort of match the hue from the shadow on this corn layer. So I will create a solid color mask, pull from there, change the blending mode. Maybe it's definitely not about that, but generally I feel like I lean on color.
I switch between color and hue depending on what I need it for, and I find that I kind of go back and forth between the two depending on what it seems like, depending on whether I'm editing a region that is very dark or editing a region that is very light.
Yes, I know. So, I'm still trying to pinpoint like how to differentiate between the two, because I do find that it works, you know, differently in different ways, just depending on what you're doing. I've also added a levels mask just because I know, like, obviously if there's a shadow here, like these are not going to be as bright as they would be. You know, you can even go in and destroy your images a little bit more if you wanted, and physically like burn those kernels in as well. I just find myself doing a mix until it works. I do think the shape is a little weird on these, so maybe I'll go in and get rid of them a little bit more. but
could also like
or even
use
like
like a
blend them together.
larger, yeah, like I think maybe I might
That might be the
attempt to enlargen my brush and then just kind of like, yeah,
blend those together. I think that's
kind of blend it in a way.
a good idea. And then I'll free transform this layer sometimes too, and try to like push these things over as well. It's a little difficult right now, but that's where liquify comes in. Sometimes I'll even like flatten all these layers, just edit that part, and then like mask that back on top, which is what I think I would do here. And maybe I'll try it. So I've just duplicated the set of layers that I know I need to work with. That gives me sort of this base to work with here. And then I'll go back. I'll use my patch tool to start blending these together, create some like very long kernels.
Nice,
just for now. Because again, like no one's gonna notice, right?
No, and
we all
the
notice
thing is like corn
out.
Though has like
super
it's
weird.
Yeah, that like things can be like not every kernel is perfect and 100% like in a straight line or whatever. So I think it just in a way adds more to like the believability of the fact that it's like an organic piece of something in this piece. Another thing I do want to point out really quick is that we do have about 25 minutes left of the stream. So if anyone has any questions that they want to ask, just know that we are going to be coming to a close in a little while. And we will be back tomorrow, same time, same bat place, at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. But if you'd like to ask any questions of Aaron and get any advice on things between now and tomorrow's stream, please feel free to ask now. This is a great time. Jessica wants to know, did either of you attend Adobe Max 2020? If so, what were some of your favorite? I think that we were both live streaming for Adobe Max 2020, Aaron.
Yes,
yeah.
I did.
I moderated for your segment. Nice. I thought it was really cool. Like it was like updates in Lightroom, right? Yes. That's cool.
That was it. I was just like, I was thinking about that earlier. I was like, was that 3 months ago, 3 years ago, or 2 days ago?
I feel the same way sometimes. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
That's why I'm like, yes, I was there. Yeah. It's all from the same room. So I'm like,
People ask me like, usually like, when is or did you go to the last TwitchCon? And I'm just like, I've been to a TwitchCon, but was it the last one? I don't know. Sure. My brain doesn't organize it that way. Not sure when I went, but I was there at some point.
Right, exactly. Like I made an appearance. I'm gonna leave the kernels how they are for now, just because I'm not gonna spend so much time. I can do that after hours finessing.
I can't even tell right now too, by the way. So like you did a good job.
I was to say, even from this far out, turning on and off this like minor adjustment layer that I made, it doesn't really do anything. I think it's just about filling in this sort of these highlights a little bit more, which I'll totally do. But I do want to tackle the top of this bottle. So
let's do it.
Placed a second image that was like close enough angle wise, I think, for the top of the bottle. I can show you guys how to alter that to make it a little bit more straight on with the same perspective. So, I have a lot of images of this bottle. I could use just straight on one. I could use something like this, or I could just use something sort of already in the similar placement, but with my hand and the other half. So I basically, it's the same process, going in, lining up, haven't rasterized yet, to make sure that like the scale is pretty much there. And I think the priority here would be maybe the lid is I like to try to find like one anchor point to build everything else around. Like what the priority is here, I think the tweezers are mainly intersecting that lid and all those fine lines on the lid. Like I don't want to mess with those. I don't want to do those in post. It's
No,
just not,
thanks.
I don't think you guys want to watch me do that today. So I'm going to really prioritize that and then figure out the face and the rest of the elements later. Hope that they line up accordingly as well.
I think that's one of the worst decisions I ever made. Like you said, like I don't want to do this in post. I'm not a, super seasoned when it comes to photographing things. I made the mistake of photographing a bunch of like physical merchandise that I was selling on my website for a while. And every time I took a photo that was like sort of okay, but not quite what I wanted, I was like, I'll fix it in post. I'll fix it in post. And then what I had at the end was like this collection of photos that were not quite good enough and like 8 hours of work ahead of me. And it's like it's not fun.
Sometimes you also don't have everything that you need for post.
Take iterations, take multiple photos, try things, experiment. Don't assume that you'll be able to take care of it in post, because even if you can, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy or like fun to sit there and do it.
Exactly. So what I'm doing here on the base layer is I'm just going in on my mask and erasing most of the face, basically like from where the neck connects up, just to clear the room. I am going to keep this ear, I think is a good area to line up, to sort of merge the two images together. We can already see with my other mask that like it's already like beginning to work. It is a different angle, but I do think we can totally make it work and nobody would ever know, which is good. But something like this, where, this is as much of the image that I need, and I know for a fact, maybe I'll paint it just a little bit more to work with. But I know for a fact that like, I'm not going to need any more of this image than what's here. I'll duplicate it just to be safe, but I am going to apply the mask just so that I have like a smaller frame to work with to free transform.
Yeah.
Let me just clear this out. Sometimes to get rid of the stuff existing outside of my actual frame, I will just crop the image.
I do that all the time.
Okay, good to
Don't worry. Anytime I like create something and I'm just like, sometimes it's actually usually for me personally when I create like what's going to be the background texture of a piece. And so I have like all of these different textures and colors and like images maybe overlaid on, over each other in a group. And then I'll convert it to a smart object, or like merge it down. And then I know that like when I free transform it, I'll pull it in from the edge and there's all these bars where the textures like aren't lined up. And then I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to hit C and enter and just cut that away. Pretend it didn't happen.
It's definitely one of those things. Like I did study photography in college eventually, but before that, I was all self-taught. And even studying photography in college, again, dating myself, but it wasn't a huge digital focus. So I learned Photoshop just by opening it up one day when I was a teenager and going from there. So I feel like I still have some of the same habits while working that I'm just like, well, this has always worked for me, or this is the only way that I know how to like clear a canvas. So that's how I'm gonna do it. So I've lined this up pretty nicely, I think. And I liked sort of the angle of the honey in the bottle.
Yeah, that looks really good.
So now I can go back in from here with my paintbrush and sort of paint away the rest, right? So I don't need my fingers, and I don't need my fingers reflection. So I still have that base honey layer that I'm working with, especially I would say like around the corn that I spent a little bit of time on cleaning up. I can go in and I like to just manually paint it away. I'm still, after 20 years, finessing my abilities with the pen tool. I think
do what you gotta do.
Like literally up until this week, I would say like I've never been good at it. And so I'm now just starting to incorporate it into projects to cut things out. But I do think with the paintbrush, from my knowledge at least, I can like lightly feather to blend a little bit easier instead of like I don't want a super sharp line around this because I am blending it,
Yeah.
technically two other images. So I'm just gonna go in, focus on the edges. I do, if I erase, like have that other ear overlap, so I don't need to worry too much about this. I just want to make sure that I'm not overlapping on the kernels. And then I can see here my layer. Okay, I've created a pretty defined edge, and then I'm just going to paint out a little bit more around it with my brush, just to make sure that I'm truly getting rid of everything else in the, that exists.
Yeah. Gabriella says, I love your work, Aaron. You're great. And then we also have Pick that just jumped in. It's good to see you again, Pick. Welcome back. And then Fairy is asking how to get the bottle at the exact same angle. And I think that it's kind of, been a collection of what you're doing. It's just like finding different images of like the same item and then kind of piecing out, kind of what you need from each image until you have a complete form, it seems.
Exactly. And again, there are many ways to do that. Like I could have tried to tackle painting and duplicating and cloning out this, the tweezers. But for me, I think it's easier to just undo that work to have known that I can put two images together.
Yeah.
That's our honey bottle. I know that the head is a slightly different perspective. So again, I'll point out something that nobody else would realize, but we can know together, like I can see the top of the cap here. So I would see less of this at the bottom. Obviously I can't see any of the bottom like going inwards, but I kind of like this reflection that the blue is giving on the lid. I think it adds sort of another opportunity for color and to sort of really place it in the environment that it's in.
I think you could probably like
keeping it straight on.
If you experimented maybe with taking the darker shadow away, like subtracting it from the foot of the bottle, it might make it like, I think either or, like if you took that shadow from the end, it would make it look more like it's angled that way. Or I know you like the reflection, but to flip it the other way, just grab one of the other lids and throw it on, and you could make it, kind of angle. But that's tricky. I admire you doing all this because sometimes I have a hard time trying that.
I could even, manually use the pen tool and cut it away and figure it out. Maybe it does look a little, I don't know. I will think on it. I do think, I want to keep building up. I think we've got our 3 layers or objects so far. So I think we'll just keep going, and then I'll go in and like finesse those sort of things.
The tower begins, y'all. It is slowly growing.
I did cut out a few things ahead of time too, just so that we're not just cutting things out again and again. So I do have the cereal bowl ready.
Nice.
I just didn't know how I wanted to start it. I think I'll do the cereal next, and then as you can see, I do have sort of references of the bowl balance on the
like
bear.
On the bear, okay.
As I was thinking, okay, like this angle gives us opportunity to maybe place something over here now and balance something on the tip of the bear. I can't remember if I took any photos of it I do have it on the corn in case I wanted to go that direction. But I think what I'll do is I'll pull in, I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I know that I cut this one out for the actual cereal. So I think this angle might look like it matches up with the base of the bowl and just something that you would never think about otherwise, but even this just reflection of the honey bear on the bowl. I think that's why it's important versus just like pulling something like this. And because I just think I would drive myself crazy after it was placed, not realizing why it didn't look totally realistic instead of
and then it's that little detail that just your brain kind of knows is missing, but you don't really think of. Exactly. What was that because I don't use Camera Raw a lot, so I don't know if it's a feature
Sure.
that is included or something that you just have on your computer. The square that came up that was kind of like a magnifying glass
Yeah,
that is
it
so
is.
cool.
It is built in, yeah. So it's nice, especially for checking sharpness or focus
Yeah.
points of an image. It's a really cool tool. All you have to do is click, and it'll magnify whatever place you can see. There's something on my finger in that one, and then you can drag it around. So like as if you're looking through like a very old school like film contact sheet with the magnifying
Yeah,
glass.
yeah. Oh, that's so cool. All right, that's neat. That's
Yeah,
good to know. I might jump in
I
and
think
kind of experiment with that.
I think Lightroom does it as well.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
Depending on like what view mode you're in. Um, yeah, so I'm going to place this bowl roughly.
Man, those are like almost at the exact same like tilt level right there. That's just crazy. Okay, one thing, it's possible that this comes from just like having a lot of experience doing what you're doing, but I'm looking a lot at these images that you have taken for this project, and there are so many consistent angles, even when you have like first the corn laying on, but on the ground by itself, then it laying
Sure.
on the the burger, and then with the bowl on it and everything. Like I'm seeing a lot of really good angles that match each other, even when you've already picked it up and moved it away and moved it around. And so I'm wondering if it's just, like I said, like that experience where you can kind of look and almost like take a snapshot and just be like, oh, this is kind of the angle that I think I had it at, and then take some more reference images for that same thing. Or do you go back and like review and like come back and do it? Or did it just like accidentally happen that way? I'm wondering, because it looks very deliberate. Maybe I'm busting you out.
No, no,
and you
I
wanted to
appreciate
like
it. No, I swear my only trick was this. I think I shoot tethered as much as I can. So I'll shoot into Lightroom. And so that way I can sort of match up the angles as I go.
Gotcha.
There's a way in Lightroom to do sort of like an onion skin, like half transparency layer as something that you shot before. So for a lot of the time for client jobs, once I like anchor that first thing, I will screenshot it, upload it there, and then I'll be able to like line it up pretty exactly as I shoot, which is pretty nice. But something like this, I think, just cross-referencing it as I shoot. Like usually I have my laptop set up next to the table that I'm shooting on with the remote for the camera. So I'm not actually ever like looking through the camera while I'm shooting these.
Oh,
because
nice.
the focus is locked, the angle is locked, everything is locked. Because no matter where, and I roughly know like what, how far the subject will be from the camera. So the focus, is what it is based on what the camera settings are and how it's being shot. So I think that kind of helps give it a touch of reality as well. Just knowing
Nice.
like, okay, if I want something further back, it'll be a little bit out of focus, but I don't have to do that manually because it's already done in the camera. So that's like, so I don't have to worry about that. I think another part too is just I use the same sort of clamps and tools as I go, which kind of help inform what angles things are as well. So yeah, it's a little bit deliberate, I would say.
Well, I think you're doing a great job. We've got some more questions for you in the chat. Sure. We got, looks like 1, 2, and let's see. It looks like Ferry, we just answered Ferry's tips. He said, how do you get that bottle in the exact same angle? Any tips? And you were kind of talking about like using the same tools and like the same methods and process when you're taking all of these photos. Technically, like it kind of leads you to photograph, like you use that clamp to like lean that up against. And if you're always using that clamp and you're always using things of like that size or then you're typically going to have them positioned. And then, as you said, like maybe just preview and reviewing the images during the photo shoot instead of just taking all these photos and then hoping that you get what you need by the end.
Right.
kind of keeping an eye on it. And then we have Jessica saying, do you think going to school prepared you for the real world? Did you find yourself having to do a lot of self-learning?
I think school is never a bad idea. I think just by nature of school, you have time. So I think
Mm-hmm.
if you're ever given the opportunity to just have time that informs your craft, that's maybe the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing I could argue that you can have. Just that
Mm-hmm.
sort of uh, safe place and safety net to create. I think with something like the residency, for example, that was like the biggest benefit that I had was just like the luxury of knowing that I could create and the consequences were only people watch me fail, not I
Mm-hmm.
can pay my rent. So I think with something like school, especially when you're studying um, in a creative field, I do think because there are so many ways that people go about their process or so many different focus areas. I think for me, it was a big thing for me that I didn't want to go to a super fine arts program because I knew that I wanted to work as a photographer commercially, but I also didn't want to go to a photo program that was super technically based because I just don't think that I would have done a good job. So I think by default with school, no matter what, like there's always going to be a self-learning element because there's no way that, you know, a particular class or teacher can cater exactly to every single student's experience or
Yeah,
needs
what they're
or
gonna
what
do and
exactly, yeah. So what I did was I just made sure that on top of, you know, the schoolwork is that there's a lot of opportunity, especially in art school, for those personal projects. But more importantly for me, like I created a lot of interdisciplinary opportunities with friends. And that's where I really
Mhm.
saw that I grew the most. So I would work with
Nice.
illustrators or, you know, even actors or set designers to work on photo projects or even other projects that I would have never thought that I could be a part of otherwise, just to sort of get these new experiences that school offers that it might not
Mhm.
necessarily offer in the course book. So I don't think it's
Nice.
absolutely necessary, but I do think it's if you have that opportunity, it is extremely beneficial with that caveat of knowing that it's like you can't expect everything to be handed to you. You just really have to know how to make the most out of it.
Mhm.
That's a very long-winded
No,
explanation.
that was great. That was a wonderful explanation. We do have about 3 minutes left before we
Okay,
have to take off for the day. So,
sure.
the last question that I have for you is from Jessica, who wants to know if you can name some designers that inspire you. Maybe you could give us one or two that we could check out after the stream, and then let us know where the best place is to find you on the web so that folks can give you a follow and things before we end our broadcast.
Sure. I can talk about photographers that inspire me if that works.
Yeah, maybe just name one or two
Yeah. I mean,
right
for
quick since we're
me,
limited on time.
the photographer that like made me interested in photography is this guy named David LaChapelle. He did a lot of
Mhm.
celebrity portraiture and fashion shoots in the 90s, early 2000s, and just sort of showed me that photography didn't have to be what I assumed it was in terms
Mhm.
of pictures of trees or, you know, super documentary style work. It kind of showed me how you can take something so cinematic and package it up in a different medium. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and that was really like my biggest, I guess, he led me down the rabbit hole of photography and discovering a lot of really interesting photographers that work
You said
across different media.
David LaChapelle.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So definitely check
Yeah.
that photographer out if you folks want to see where some of Aaron's inspiration comes from. And then what is the best place to find you online, Aaron? Because we've
Sure.
got maybe a minute and a half left.
Yeah, you can find me on my website at hungry-boy.com or Instagram is hungry.boy.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it has been really, really fun getting to hang out with you today and go over your
Yeah.
process. It's been super cool, not only watching you work, but like just kind of hearing about like your thought process and everything when it comes to what you're doing. I think you're also just a wonderfully pleasant person and just fun to hang out with in general, despite the cool project that's going on. So thank you. And thank you, chat, for joining us. I think the last thing we'll do real quick is probably pull up the schedule just to remind you folks of what's coming up next. And then we'll take off. We've got the replay of the Daily Creative Challenge after this, followed by packaging design with Alex Lazarus at noon Pacific time. The replay of the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge with me is right after that. And then at 2:30 Pacific, the draw along with Kyle T. Webster. And then, yeah, that is a wrap for today. Thank
Awesome.
you, everyone, so much. It was a blast chat. It was a blast, Aaron, and we will catch you tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time for episode 2. Adios, everybody.
Thanks, guys.